Everything else that determines race is a social construct based on physical characteristics. But how did these physical characteristics, how did these physical differences come about? The many races of humanity began with the ultimate communication issue. Genesis 11, 1 through 9 has the account of the Tower of Babel. The people built what's known as a ziggurat, essentially a spiritual radio tower. Now, when I was a kid, I used to see these, we used to have to do these coloring books, and there was this tower that looked like, you know, that it was an actual tower, skyscraper, trying to reach the heavens, not quite getting there, but that's not accurate, okay? What they were doing is they were baking brick, essentially making crystals, and creating essentially what was a spiritual radio tower. And by the way, that crystal, those crystals, refined, are what power our computers, our phones, or not what power them, but what cause them to be able to work. So we still use that Tower of Babel technology in a way. So essentially what they created was, again, a spiritual radio tower. And the thing is, these ziggurats were believed to bring down the deity that was being worshipped in them. Well, they got the attention of a deity, all right. They just didn't get the attention of the one they thought they were getting the attention of. They got the attention of the God of the universe. Their false God didn't come down. The God who is true and living is the one that came down. Let's look at Genesis 11, 6 through 7. And the Lord said, Behold, the people is one, and they have all one language, and this they begin to do, and now nothing will be restrained from them, which they have imagined to do. Go to, let us go down, and there confound their language, that they may not understand one another's speech. Notice, God seems to be mocking them. If you read earlier, they say, hey, go to, let us build a tower. All right, he's seems to be having a little laughter at their expense here. Okay? They wanted to raise themselves up and said, go to, and God's kind of humbling them and saying, let us go to. The people thought basically they could get together and have kind of a United Nations summit and make a plan, and God himself recognized nothing will be restrained from them which they have imagined to do. He simply saw that if left unchecked, these people would continue to disobey and commit evil before him. Was God worried about it? Nah. We know our God. He already had a plan. Moving on to Genesis 11:8. So the Lord scattered them abroad from thence upon the face of the earth, and they left off to build the city. See, these people, they're trying to talk to each other, and all that came out was word salad. And there was nothing even close to an ESL class for anybody to take to try to understand each other. And because they would not obey the command of God, which was only 3 generations removed from Noah himself, to fill the earth, God forced them to scatter upon the face of it so that they would. So the Lord brought about the circumstances that caused them to finally do what they had been disobeying him and not doing. Now, naturally, once language was confounded, those that spoke a given language would walk up to each other and they would try to communicate. They couldn't communicate, so they would find somebody who finally understood what they were saying, and they would form groups, and they would go and live off on their own. Okay? There were no interpreters on the scene, folks. Sorry. Here is where we can see the foundation laid for different races of people due to what biologists call the founder effect. According to the National Human Genome Research Institute, the founder effect is essentially a reduction in the variation within a given gene pool. The possible variations in characteristics is widely reduced. Guys, I have blue eyes. I came from a gene pool that has the gene for blue eyes. Okay? People in a new gene pool that's broken off from the one they just came from may not carry the gene for blue eyes into the new population. So there would be no possibility for blue eyes. Or the new population may not carry the gene for straight hair. So there would be no possibility for straight hair. There is no turning Japanese. I think I'm turning Japanese. I really think so. The Japanese stay Japanese. Unless they marry somebody of another racial construct and they start adding information into the population. Essentially, when all people are together intermarrying, no one trait becomes pronounced in that population. For example, genetic science has proven that brown-skinned people have the capacity, after several generations, to produce lighter or darker children. But if all the brown people stay together and intermarry, everyone will continue to have brown skin with little variance. Unless intermarriage between what we consider races takes place, every smaller gene pool maintains the same basic characteristics. People who breed dogs have been able to separate animals into populations, and no, I am not comparing humans with dogs. I'm just comparing how genetics works. Okay? I'm giving you an example of how genetics works. Because if that's the case, I'm a dog too. All right? In fact, if you want to get right down to it, every race on Earth, we're all mutts. Anyway, so unless the, let me, just had a brain thing. Here we go. I'm getting old. People who breed dogs have been able to separate animals into populations that possess the physical or personality characteristics that they're looking for. And they keep doing this over several generations to finally attain the physical or personality traits in every dog produced in that line. And that's how we get dog breeds. In fact, researchers bred foxes into two lines. Foxes that showed an affinity for people were bred with each other, and foxes that were aggressive to people were bred with each other. And the animals who were the most aggressive were bred together, while animals who were the most loving with humans were bred together. After only a few generations, every fox in the aggressive group was aggressive to the point of chewing on the cage and growling or trying to attack through the cage at the very sight of the human beings who were feeding them. And every fox in the loving group were actually wagging their tails like dogs and whining and getting excited to receive the affection from the scientists. We're not talking about dogs. We're talking about foxes, folks. Not house dogs. Now, what does this have to do with what we're talking about? Well, when God separated out the peoples, they left into groups in which certain physical and personality characteristics would become more pronounced. To take the most extreme example, people with darker skin genes migrated into Africa, while people with lighter skin genes migrated into the Caucasus Mountains in Russia. That's right, white people, you're all Russians. Live with it. After just one or two generations, the lighter group breeding with each other became lighter, and the darker group breeding with each other became darker as his genes were expressed. Native Americans were descended from Asians. There have been genetic tests proving this. But they tend to have higher cheekbones than Asians because the people who broke off from the main group continued to only reproduce with each other. And the genes for higher cheekbones became more expressed. This is yet another reason, as though we need any more, that racism just doesn't make sense. Blonde-haired, blue-eyed people originally descended from brown-skinned, black-haired people.